Hi, today we're going to look at Dick Tracy, number one. It's not really number one, but it's called The Original Dick Tracy by Chester Gould, released by Gladstone in the year 1990, the same year that the Dick Tracy movie came out. And what I want to do with these videos is basically look at just random comics from my pile of stuff, uh, and they're not necessarily keys, and they're not necessarily comics with like big famous characters. I mean, Dick Tracy's fairly famous, but um, they're not all going to be Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. These are just comics that appeal to me for whatever reason, personal or otherwise, and I just like looking through actual comics rather than digital. I think digital is great for getting the gist of stories and stuff just readily accessible. But I like the original comics themselves. All of the things um, that came out at the time of the comics, all of the ephemera like letters, pages, and columns and advertisements, things like that. So let's take a look at Gladstone's Dick Tracy number one, Dick Tracy versus Pruneface. This is the first Dick Tracy comic I ever bought. This is probably the first one I ever read, I think. Um, because I thought I read something else before this, but that was after this. I had already seen the movie. I liked it. It was fun and cool. But after reading this, I realized something very important. That movie was not Dick Tracy. It's fun. It's colorful. It's got a lot of the villains, but it's not the tone and the mood of the character and his adventures. So I've got some flags here, but start off. Um, Gladstone wrote a whole like thing about Dick Tracy, everything about his origin and Chester Gould especially. It's continued on the back, on the inside back cover as well. And I poured over this. I thought that was very fascinating as well as a kid. I must have been maybe like 12 or 13 when this came out. And here's Mrs. Pruneface. I knew Pruneface. To me, Pruneface and Flat Top were the two most popular villains from Dick Tracy, and that's probably because my dad was into Dick Tracy when he was a kid, so he would tell me all about this stuff. And the nature of these stories were basically um, they would run in comic strips. I think this is from 1943 or something, and they were basically movie length. And when I read this adventure, it felt like I was reading a movie with a cat and mouse game between Dick Tracy and Mrs. Pruneface. But Mrs. Pruneface captures Dick Tracy right off the bat, and he doesn't know what this is all about. He doesn't know who this woman is. And of course, Dick Tracy villains were famous for being very grotesque. Um, Basically wearing their sins on their faces. That's not readily said in these things, but they're always very ugly, and they always met very ugly demises. So she's captured Dick Tracy. She's toying with him. He has no clue who this woman is, and basically she's concocting a booby trap for him. And this booby trap is fairly clever and is in keeping with Chester Gould's amazing writing. So basically, she's going to, she doesn't want to just kill him, she wants him tortured and then killed. So she has two big ice blocks, puts Dick Tracy between them, puts a plank on top of them with a stake, and moves a big block on top of it, and then turns on a heater, and the heater then melts the ice so that the stake goes deeper and deeper into his heart. And so Dick Tracy's like, I don't know what to do here. But he figures out that the floor is uneven, and if he were to hit the floor several times with his body, he could make the well because the floor is uneven. Any sort of movement will tilt things towards the side, and hopefully tilt the stake toward the side as well. And he's doing this constantly. And the cops are searching for Dick Tracy, and then they find him just in the nick of time. I thought that was really clever. I remember reading this thinking, wow, it's not like fun and games and colorful cartoonery. It's sort of realistic and gritty and clever as well. So Mrs. Pruneface dons a disguise and goes undercover to hide out from the cops as a chef. And like as a French chef, basically. And later on, her henchman basically gives her away by, she has a whip, and he's playing around with the whip, and the whip falls out of the building, and kids get the whip, and so it sort of gives them away. And she's incensed by this. So here's another thing that struck me. Mrs. Pruneface basically, like, bludgeons this man to death with like a light stand, just like hacks into his head, and there's blood as well. And I was like, wow, that's pretty gritty and brutal. Nothing like the cartoonery I thought that Dick Tracy was. And so like Mrs. Pruneface is basically undercover as this like trying to hide out from the cops as a chef, and the mayor of all people eats at her establishment and hires her on the spot, and she thinks, hey, that's a great hideout. I will be the personal chef of this mayor. No one will ever find me. But here, Dick Tracy is onto her. He knows the description of Mrs. Pruneface in general, and the guy who hired her to be a chef at the restaurant describes her, and then he tracks her down to the mayor's office. But here she's found out. So this is another thing I was struck by. Reading this, I read this all in one go as a kid, and I was like, my gosh, like, just do this as a Dick Tracy movie. Dick Tracy usually fought one villain at a time. There's usually a villain that would do something like pull a heist or kill people or something, and Dick Tracy was on the case and would play a game of cat and mouse with the villain, find the clues, track them down, maybe get captured and cleverly get out of a booby trap somehow. And it would all come to a gruesome end. And even the movies that were made back in the 40s didn't really capture that. But these comics are great. Like, they could easily be created, like, they can be adapted into movies today. So they're horsing around with her, and then they all fall into a pool. And Mrs. Pruneface, then, her disguise is gone. So they see her, and this looks like a horror movie, like terrifying. So then she beats this guy to death and basically drowns him. And they're showing it right in front of your eyes. And so he's dead here. And they have these gruesome shots of like the body just floating in the water. And I should say to Mrs. Pruneface, so Pruneface was a famous villain, I guess because people just remember that character, but that character died in that story, and so this is basically, they never really alluded to the idea that he had a wife, but the wife then seeks revenge on Dick Tracy here. So now there's a dead body in the pool, and everyone's freaking out. And Mrs. Pruneface wants to kill these two, I guess they're daughters of the mayor, with a scalding cauldron of soup. And so Dick Tracy arrives on the scene. He's like, there's a dead body. The girls then use a fan and some flour to blind her. And so Mrs. Pruneface then slips and hits her head on the stove. But that's not what kills her. So the mayor's wife has been invalid all this time. She can't walk. And so they hear gunshots at one point, and they walk in and see that there's a trail of blood coming from a downed Mrs. Pruneface's body here. And they're like, well, and I don't know who says, haha, that's that. I don't think it's Dick Tracy. I think it's one of these girls. He's not that callous. And so the wife comes out and she's like, oh, I just came out and I had a gun. I shot her. This is all very weird. And they never really write it as weird. It's basically, she says that, oh, in a moment of emergency, you gain strength that you didn't have. And she comes out and she shoots Mrs. Pruneface in the head. And I guess isn't arrested for it. And the family's all reunited and everything's fine. But I thought, after reading this story, I was like, wow, I need to read more Dick Tracy. This is amazing stuff. It's gritty, it's violent, it doesn't talk down to you. Whether or not Dick Tracy was made for kids, I don't know, but reading this myself, I was like, wow, this doesn't talk down to me. It doesn't pull any punches. And the thing about Dick Tracy was always that bad guys always lose very gruesomely, so never do bad things. That's basically the gist of Dick Tracy. At the end of the history of Chester Gould and Dick Tracy, they talk about how Gladstone is reprinting these. So there were 5 of these. And of course, they were all coming out around the time of the movie. And they say Gladstone has opted to kick off its new series of reprints of classic Tracy adventures by presenting complete in this issue the story of Mrs. Pruneface, which ran in the newspapers from July 16th, 1943 through September 30th, 1943. This tale of a truly indescribable villainess bent on a sadistic revenge, her scheme involving cakes of ice, a hot oven, and a refrigerator is spine-chilling. Yeah, it's very memorable. Shows Gould at his best. If you're reading it for the first time, I envy you. You'll see why Gould's stories are timeless. Well, I did read it for the first time, and I saw right then and there Chester Gould's Dick Tracy stories are incredible. And if you are able to track them down, read at least one. And here you can subscribe. I didn't subscribe to this, but yeah, double size, 64 pages. So they made 5 of these, and I have all of them. But because I dig comics out and I read them, and then I shove them wherever I am, like in my my headboard or my nightstand or whatever, then they go missing, and I have to search for them in the house. But I dug this one out. Of course, you can see it's been well read, well used. It's not in great condition, but I'll keep this, of course, because it's a great Dick Tracy issue, and I intend to keep anything Dick Tracy. I hope you enjoyed this. Take care.